Well, we're going to take a trip down south, and I do mean way down south to Brazil, and I'm going to show you how to make one of the most delicious breads that they have down there, which is very popular right now here in America. It's called Brazilian cheese bread, or pão de queijo, coming up right now on Cooking with Chef Bryan. Welcome everybody to Cooking with Chef Bryan. This is one of my all-time favorite breads, period. When I lived in Brazil, this is one that I would love to go to the padaria, which is the bakery essentially in the neighborhoods. You'd go there to get this bread as well as many other little baked goods. And it was a cheese bread. And I remember the first time I had it, I thought, this is the most delicious bread I've ever had. I can't believe it, because we did not have it here in America at that point, nor did we really have the ingredients to make it. Because it starts off with tapioca starch, and this is something that really is fairly a new thing, I would say, in the last 10 to 12 years I began to see it in the grocery stores. But this is what you use, and I do have some here. I'm not promoting any brand at all, but this is what it looks like. And I just bought it at Smith's here in Salt Lake City. You can check your local grocery store, but all you're looking for is tapioca flour, and that's what you want, is tapioca flour. And so that is readily available now with all the gluten problems and celiac disease, unfortunately, that are out there. And fortunately, many of these types of flours have come out to us in the general public. So check it out in your grocery store. But first of all, we're going to start by actually heating up some milk, water, and oil. And I had to laugh. When I came back from Brazil, you know, I made some cheese bread because I actually found some a mix for it, which you can buy here in Salt Lake City or at any generally import store from South America. They'll sell Brazilian food and you can find a cheese bread mix. It's in Portuguese and I think it has an English label on it that'll tell you how to translate it, but you can follow. It's fairly easy. It's got pictures and shows you the pictures, so it's fairly easy. But when I came back, I had forgotten that you have to bring the milk and water to a boil. And so, you know, I'm showing all these people and mixing it up, and it did not work out. And the reason for that is we have to activate the starches in the actual tapioca flour. And so starches are very unique molecules. They're huge. But what happens is, because you're going to heat up this, just like if you were making a gravy, and you do a roux with butter and flour in a pan, then you add the milk, bring it to a boil, and it heats up. What happens is that heat causes the starch molecules to absorb that liquid into them, and by so doing, they enlarge just like a balloon, and then they pop. And all of these protein structures come out in suspension and bind together with each other, and that's what causes the thickening action. And so we have to actually do that with this particular thing, starch bread, because of this, because it has no flour, there's no gluten in it, it's gluten-free, and you can change out the milk to oat milk or soy milk or, you know, something other than a dairy milk if you're allergic to dairy also. And so it's just one of those really simple things to do, but you've got to understand that chemistry, that we have to activate the starches here. So now that we've got this on the stove, I'm going to watch it here. As soon as it comes to a boil, I'll turn it off and we'll add it into our mixer. Now I'm using my KitchenAid rather than my Bosch today, because the paddle attachment on the KitchenAid actually stirs things at a much slower rate than the paddles on the Bosch. And so it actually gives me a lot more control in being able to stir things in rather than basically whip them in. And so that's just my own personal preference. And you know, I have so many stories when it comes to Brazil after living there for a few years. I was in Uberlândia, which is in the state of Anápolis, or Goiás, I should say. And it's a really fun state because they just have so many delicious food. It would be kind of like the Florence of Brazil. They just have delicious food of cheese and beef and dairy products, and it's just really delicious. And so we'll go ahead and add that starch into there now. But I was there in Uberlândia, and I was over at a home of Mary Franson. I remember that name to this very day. dear friend. I haven't heard from her for years and years and years and years. But she was teaching several of us how to make pão de queijo, or this Brazilian cheese bread. And they didn't have a mixer like this. And let me tell you, you can make it by hand. It's a lot of work though. When you do have the mixer like such as the KitchenAid, it makes it much easier to actually do. But you can make this by hand, and that's not a problem. So I have preheated our oven to 400 degrees because once you get this going, it comes together quite quickly. And so now that our milk and everything has come up to a boil, I'm going to pour it right into the starch. Now, the thing is about this, remember, just like if you add hot liquid to any type of starch, it's going to begin to thicken up. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. It'll begin to thicken up, and I'm going to move this bowl up into position, and I'm going to just put this on a low speed and let this begin to mix together. It kind of reminds me of making a pâte à choux dough, where you actually heat up the milk and the butter and you add it to the flour, which has starch, and then you mix it together. It becomes that thick solid mass. Well, guess what we're going to do next? We're going to add the eggs into it here. So I'm going to let this mix together. When we come back, we're going to continue on with our Brazilian cheese bread, or pão de queijo. Are you looking for some delicious side dishes for dinner? Well, why not try Green Giant Fresh Minute Mashes? They're simple, they come in 3 different flavors for your dinner, and all you have to do is put them in the microwave, 7 minutes, pop them out, smash them in the bag, and serve them. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Welcome back, everybody. We're working on some Brazilian cheese bread, and I've just mixed the starch and the liquids together here earlier. So it has milk, it has some water, and it has some oil in there that we brought to a boil, added it into the starch or the tapioca flour, and it's thickened it up. And I wanted to just kind of show you, it feels almost gelatinous. And so when you kind of feel it after it's doing it, it almost feels, well, gelatinous is the best word I can come up with, but that's what it is when it's mixed together. And so now that we have that all mixed together, what we're going to do is add the eggs. Now the eggs are going to help now be our leavener, because we basically, since there is no flour in there, we activated the starches, we created this, basically this gelatinous mass of dough in here, and then we're going to add eggs into it, which are a natural leavener. And so the eggs, when we mix them into it, are going to create this leavener, so when it goes in the oven, it's going to rise. And so I think it's kind of cool. I love the chemistry of food. I think it's fun. So we're going to add that, 1 egg into that, kind of let it break up, start mixing in. We're going to add the second egg, and these are just large eggs, and let that start mixing in. Now I'm going to warn you, when you add in the eggs to that, you're going to go, that's never going to mix into that. It will mix into it, and that's why the machine is so handy. I remember we were doing this by hand before, and that takes a lot of work to mix that by hand. I'm going to add in a couple of teaspoons of salt into it, and there is our salt. And now we're going to let this mix up here, and it may take a minute or two. Remember, you've got this really gelatinous dough in there, and to mix that egg, all that liquid and things from the egg into there, may take a minute. That's why the machine is awesome. Now let's talk about the cheese that we're going to put into there. Now you can get all kinds of fancy if you want to grate your own mozzarella cheese and that. I just buy it in the big bags. It was on sale, and so even better. And if I don't use all of this, I do freeze it, believe it or not. Now it kind of does change the texture a little bit when you're working with it after it's been frozen, but it's still going to be perfect. And we're going to use a little bit of mozzarella, and we're going to use some shredded Parmesan cheese. If you have a big block of Parmesan cheese, you need to shred it finely, because that's what's going to give it the flavor. And that's another thing, you have to kind of be careful about how much salt goes into it, because Parmesan cheese is very salty. Mozzarella cheese also has salt in it. So remember, you don't want it to be too salty. Now, just as I promised, it did come together into a mass here. And so once it gets together, it's really kind of, it just happens. I mean, all of a sudden you'll be mixing, you're thinking, that is never going to come together, and boom, it just comes together like that. Reminds me of like buttercream frosting when you mix it all together, and then you add in 1,000 pounds of butter into it, and you start adding it, and it doesn't look like it's going to come together, and then just like that it comes together. And that's basically what happened here. So I think it's kind of fun to see that. So we're going to add the cheese into there, and this particular recipe that I'm using, this volume of recipe I should say, uses a whole one of these packages, and this package is about 1.5 cups of shredded Parmesan cheese. I like mine to be a little cheesier than not, and so I like to add in maybe a little extra Parmesan cheese to it. The mozzarella cheese is a binder that we're going to use to add into there, and so that's why I'm going to add a good handful of mozzarella cheese into there. And I have to tell you, these little cheese breads here make the best sandwiches in the world. I love to make a ham sandwich. We'll do in a little bit on some of these because they are just so good because you have all that cheese, and of course cheese and ham goes great together. You put that mustard on there. Oh, it's good. And so if you are a gluten-free and you're looking for a gluten-free recipe, here's a great one for you. And so it's just one of those fortunate things that we have that we can make now here in the States because the ingredients are readily available in our grocery store. So now you're just gonna, that smells so good. I think it's the Parmesan cheese. When you have all that Parmesan cheese in there, you're gonna just go, woo-wee, that smells good. Okay, some baking sheets with some parchment paper on them. The oven is preheated to 400 degrees, and we're going to shape off these delicious cheese breads now. I'm going to turn that up just a little bit to make sure everything gets mixed into there because you have that gelatinous mass of dough around the paddle, and so you want to make sure the cheese gets inside of that. And so that's why I just turned it up a little bit and let that mix there. I have to laugh, my good old KitchenAid here. I've had this thing for probably 30 plus years. It just keeps on working. I've dropped it. It has scuff marks on it from being dropped, and it just keeps on working, thank goodness. So we're gonna add this into here. It's gonna be kind of a little sticky. Don't worry about that. We're gonna get it shaped up here. And I think that's just part of the fun of it. If you haven't ever tried this, you've definitely got to try it. So let's just get all the rest of that off of there. Just gonna press that down into there. I'll put this into the sink. And what you're gonna do when you start to shape these is a little trick here. And if you work a lot with doughs, you're probably gonna know what this little trick is, but I'll tell you what it is when we come back here in a second. We're gonna shape off these pound queijo, get them in the oven baking, and then we'll make a ham sandwich out of them. Don't go away.
It's no secret, frozen rolls are fresher than bakery rolls. You see, bakery rolls are made in commercial bakeries. Then they sit all day in stores. Some even contain preservatives because rolls begin to stale immediately. By the time you eat your roll, it could already be days old. Rhodes Bake and Serve is found in your grocer's freezer. Simply take Rhodes frozen roll dough home and let it thaw and rise in a pan. Bake Rhodes rolls in your own oven. Rhodes Bake and Serve, hot and fresh, right out of your oven.
Welcome back, everybody, to Cooking with Chef Bryan. You know, I get so excited about making Brazilian foods because I have such a dear spot in my heart for Brazil. I think I said that Uberlândia was in Goiás. It's Minas Gerais that it's in, and I referred to it basically as the Florence of Brazil because of all the delicious food that is there. So we're going to shape off this pão de queijo, this Brazilian cheese bread, and the trick is have a bowl of water and you're going to get your hands wet so it won't stick to the hands. And so then you're going to just take a spoon, you're going to scoop some off of it here, and then you're just going to shape that into a round. And as I was telling you earlier, I remember when I was down there, we were making this without the convenience of a mixer, and boy, I'll tell you what, I am grateful for a good mixer in the kitchen. So I hope you are too. Okay, so let's just add these here, and you do want to leave plenty of space because they're going to rise, and so that's what you just need to be careful when you do that. And I do like them a little bit larger, and because I like to make sandwiches out of these in the morning or for lunch or for dinner. I just think they make the best sandwiches in the world. So let's just keep doing this here. I do remember years ago, I went out to eat at a Brazilian restaurant locally here, and they had pão de queijo, or the Brazilian cheese bread, but it was in a muffin tin. And oh, I thought that was heresy. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh, I can't believe you're making a pão de queijo in a muffin tin. That's not the way I ever saw it when it was in Brazil. But apparently they do. So that's the beauty of it. And so you can do it in a muffin tin. There are recipes out there. It's not a solid mass like this. You basically skip that step of heating the tapioca flour or the starches with the milk mixture, and that causes it to not be thick immediately. And so it kind of is a runny batter, so you pour it into the muffin tin and bake it off that way. This one is a much, as you can see, firmer batter, but yet it's still pliable enough that we can shape it off and give it a nice round shape here. And so that's important. If it's too pliable, once you shape these little balls like this, it's going to just kind of flatten out on the cookie sheet. That's what that is, the baking sheet. And so that's important to keep that in mind. And I was telling you earlier about when I came back from Brazil, it had been a while and I'd forgotten that you've got to boil that liquid first before you add it into there. And then that's exactly what happened. They just flattened out and they cooked up like pancakes. They were still really good. But for those of you that say, do you ever make a mistake, Bryan? Well, I did on that one because I failed to actually activate those starches. And so I'm just shaping off some yummy things here. The pão de queijo, shaping it off here. I think they're so delicious. Making these ones a little bit smaller, so I'll do 3 across on there. These make great gifts too. I've noticed in the stores now, like at Costco and whereabouts, you can buy these frozen. So guess what you can do? After you get these shaped just like this, you can take them, put them in the freezer, freeze them. Once they're frozen, take them off of the baking sheet, and then just put them in a resealable plastic bag in the freezer. And then you can just pull them out and bake them off as you need them. So they're very simple to put together. I sometimes think that people have put a lot of fuss into, oh, this is a tricky thing to make. It really isn't tricky. As you can see, it's very, very basic. And I think that's what I loved about Brazilian food. It was all very basic and delicious, very similar to like Italian food that you would go out and see what was ripe in the garden, and that's what you would make for dinner. Very similar to Brazil. Everything was always very, very fresh. You would go to the market every single day to get things. One, you didn't have a lot of refrigeration down there at that time. They may do now at this point. But you would go to the markets, get it fresh, and cook it up for dinner or breakfast or lunch. And of course, there was a daily trip to the padaria, or the bakery. So I'm going to keep shaping here. These are going into a preheated 400-degree oven, and they're going to bake off for about 20 minutes or until they're nice and golden brown and risen up there. So when we come back, these will be baked up and delicious. We'll turn them into a quick ham and cheese sandwich. How's that? To show you how you can use them up. Don't go away.
As summer comes into full swing, it's time to fire up the grill and treat your family to a special outdoor meal featuring everyone's favorite Klondike brand potatoes. Enjoy preparing one of our many chef-inspired recipes from the web, or create your own backyard culinary masterpiece using varieties from the full line of Klondike potatoes. Visit KlondikeBrands.com today for hundreds of recipe ideas and make your summers sizzle with Klondike Brands.
Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for joining me here on Cooking with Chef Bryan. I've been showing you how to make some Brazilian cheese bread, or pão de queijo. It is one of my absolute favorites. They've come out of the oven, they're nice and hot, and what I've done now is I've just torn some open. I'm going to put a slice of ham on each one of these. I think they make the best ham sandwiches in the world. Maybe a slice of tomato on there. And we'll serve that up with some fresh melons, since melons are so great right now. And so this recipe, you can go right to cookingwithchefbryan.com, grab the recipe, or you can grab any recipe on there for that matter. I was going to show you when you tear these open, look at this. Look how just gelatinously yummy, delicious, chewy those are. I can't wait to dig into these. So head on over to cookingwithchefbryan.com, grab the recipe. You can try a taste of Brazil. I think you're gonna really love these. With the tapioca flour, you can find it at your local grocery store. And as always, I'm on all the social media platforms, but I do pay most attention to Instagram, Chef Bryan Woolley on Instagram. Head on over there, follow me. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for saying hi when you see me out and about, and I'll see you all next time. You can find all of these complete recipes on my website, cookingwithchefbryan.com.